The September air carried the scent of caramel apples and fried dough across the St. Louis County Fair as the sun began its descent behind the Ferris wheel. For the Harris family, this annual tradition was meant to be another cherished memory, not the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt Minnesota for decades. "Freya!" Sarah Harris called out, her voice barely audible above the carnival music. "Freya!" The name grew more urgent as she scanned the crowd for her daughter's blue jacket and blonde ponytail. David Harris jogged back from the cotton candy stand, two pink clouds of sugar on paper cones. "She's not with you?" The treats fell forgotten to the ground as realization dawned. One moment she was there, the next, gone. What began as confusion quickly escalated to panic. Fair security responded to the parents' desperate pleas, closing exit gates while staff searched between game booths and carnival rides. The cheerful announcer's voice, which had been promoting the prize-winning pigs just minutes earlier, now described a missing 10-year-old girl in a blue jacket. As darkness fell, the fair's twinkling lights transformed from magical to menacing. Flashlight beams cut through shadows between tents. Volunteers formed search lines, combing every inch of the fairgrounds. Parents clutched their own children tighter, watching the Harris family's world collapse in real time. "She wouldn't just wander off," Sarah insisted to the police officer taking notes. "She knows better." Her voice cracked as David wrapped his arm around her shoulders, both staring at the space between the cotton candy stand and the Ferris wheel, the 50 yards where their daughter had somehow vanished without a trace. By midnight, the fair had emptied of everyone except law enforcement. The Ferris wheel stood motionless against the night sky, its lights extinguished. In their place, the rhythmic flash of police cruisers painted the scene in red and blue. No one could have known that night in 1997 would launch one of Minnesota's most baffling cold cases, or that the truth had been hiding in plain sight all along. If you're fascinated by cold cases that found justice, hit subscribe now. Where are you watching from today? September 13th, 1997, had started like any other fair day for the Harris family. The morning air carried that distinct Minnesota crispness that signaled summer's end, with temperatures hovering in the mid-60s, perfect weather for the county's biggest annual event. David Harris, a high school science teacher, had marked this Saturday on the calendar months in advance, knowing his daughter Freya lived for Fair Day. She was up before the alarm, Sarah Harris would later tell investigators. Already had her favorite jeans and that blue jacket laid out. She'd been counting down the days. The family arrived just after the 10 a.m. opening, joining the steady stream of visitors flowing through the main gates of the St. Louis County Fairgrounds. David remembered paying for the all-day ride wristbands, bright orange bands that the attendant secured around Freya's small wrist as she bounced with excitement. "Dad, can we do the tilt-a-whirl first?" Freya had asked, already pulling her father toward the ride section. Her blonde ponytail swung with each step, blue jacket tied around her waist until the evening chill would set in. By mid-afternoon, the fairgrounds had swelled to near capacity. The Harris family navigated through crowds estimated at over 15,000 people, a record attendance that would later complicate the investigation. They'd spent hours moving between livestock exhibitions, craft displays, and carnival games, where Freya had won a small stuffed penguin at the ring toss. "We were having the perfect day," David would repeat in subsequent interviews, his voice hollow. "Just a normal, perfect day." At approximately 5:45 p.m., the family stopped near the food court. Sarah wanted to check out the quilting exhibition, while David offered to take Freya for cotton candy before riding the Ferris wheel, her traditional end-of-day fair ritual. "I'll meet you both at the Ferris wheel in 15 minutes, Sarah had said, giving Freya a quick hug before heading toward the exhibition hall. This 15-minute window would become the focus of thousands of investigative hours. Security camera footage later recovered showed David and Freya at the cotton candy stand at 5:52 p.m. The vendor remembered them clearly, the excited girl with the stuffed penguin tucked under her arm and her father checking his watch. She asked if she could run ahead to get in line for the Ferris wheel while I waited for the cotton candy, David explained through tears during his first police interview. It was maybe 50 yards away. I could see the ride from where I stood. I said yes. The vendor confirmed seeing Freya walk away alone, heading in the direction of the Ferris wheel. 4 different witnesses would later report seeing a girl matching Freya's description walking past the ring toss booths. After that, nothing. When David arrived at the Ferris wheel approximately 3 minutes later, Freya wasn't in line. He initially assumed she'd stopped at another booth or had gone to find her mother. When Sarah arrived at the meeting point at 6:05 p.m. and neither had seen Freya, the first flickers of concern emerged. "We split up to look for her," Sarah recalled. "I thought maybe she'd gone back to the cotton candy stand or stopped to look at the game prizes." David checked the bathrooms, asked if anyone had seen a little girl in a blue jacket. By 6:30 p.m., the Harrises had alerted Fair security. By 7 p.m., the St. Louis Police Department had been called. Officer Mark Jennings was first to respond, initially treating the situation as a case of a child who had wandered off. "In most of these situations, the child turns up within an hour," Jennings noted in his report. "They get distracted, follow a crowd, or try to find a bathroom, but something about the parents' certainty made me take immediate action." Security implemented their missing child protocol, closing all but one exit gate where staff could monitor departing visitors. Announcements echoed across the fairgrounds every 5 minutes. Volunteers formed search parties, methodically covering every corner of the property. As darkness fell, the search intensified. Police brought in additional officers and set up a command post near the main entrance. By 10 p.m., the story had reached local news stations. The first reports aired on the late-night broadcasts, showing a school photo of Freya with her bright smile and distinctive dimple on her right cheek. 10-year-old girl missing from County Fair, the headlines read. Last seen wearing jeans and blue jacket. The community response was immediate. By sunrise the following day, over 200 volunteers had gathered to assist with the expanding search. The fair remained closed as investigators processed the scene, interviewing vendors, collecting security footage, and establishing a timeline. Freya Harris wasn't just any missing child case. Her father taught at the local high school. Her mother volunteered at the library's reading program. The Harris family was known and loved in St. Louis, a tight-knit Minnesota community where serious crime was rare. "Freya was in my daughter's swim class," one volunteer told reporters. "She's the kid who always shares her snacks. Who would take a child like that?" As the investigation entered its first full day, details about Freya emerged in media reports. A 4th grader at Lakeside Elementary, she excelled in science and art. Her teacher described her as thoughtful and curious. She played soccer on weekends, collected rocks, and had recently started learning the violin. The penguin she'd won at the fair, later found discarded near a trash can by the Ferris wheel, was to join her collection of stuffed animals, each named after a scientist. The first 48 hours of the investigation revealed significant challenges. The fair's security camera system was limited, covering only main entrances, the midway, and cash handling areas. The crucial area between the cotton candy stand and the Ferris wheel had no video coverage. The massive crowd meant hundreds of potential witnesses, many of whom had left before the alarm was raised. Detective Samuel Reeves, assigned as lead investigator, faced mounting pressure. "We're dealing with a narrow window of opportunity in a crowded public space," he told his team during the first briefing. "Either this was a carefully planned abduction or a crime of opportunity by someone who knew how to exploit the fair's blind spots." The initial search expanded beyond the fairgrounds to include nearby neighborhoods, wooded areas, and drainage ditches. K-9 units tracked Freya's scent from the cotton candy stand toward the Ferris wheel, but the trail disappeared near a service road behind the carnival rides, a road accessible to vendor vehicles and fair staff. By Monday morning, the FBI had joined the investigation, bringing additional resources and expertise in child abduction cases. Agent Diana Mercer specialized in child disappearances and immediately recognized troubling patterns. The location, the timing, the lack of witnesses despite the crowds. "This has the hallmarks of someone who knew what they were doing," she noted in her preliminary assessment. "And possibly someone familiar with the fair's layout and operations." As the search entered its 3rd day with no signs of Freya, the investigation shifted from rescue to recovery. The Harris family, running on coffee and hope, refused to leave the command center. Sarah clutched Freya's favorite stuffed animal, a worn plush otter named Einstein, while David methodically retraced their steps through the fairgrounds, searching for anything they might have missed. The disappearance of Freya Harris had transformed from a family's nightmare into a community's obsession and an investigator's most challenging puzzle, one that would remain unsolved far longer than anyone could have imagined. By the fourth day after Freya's disappearance, the St. Louis Police Department had established a dedicated task force operating out of a conference room at headquarters. The walls were covered with maps of the fairgrounds, timelines, and photographs. At the center hung Freya's school portrait, her bright smile a constant reminder of what was at stake. Detective Samuel Reeves led the morning briefing, dark circles under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. "We have over 200 witness statements, but the accounts don't align. We need to focus on the contradictions." The witness testimonies created a puzzling mosaic. A food vendor claimed to have seen Freya walking alone past his booth at 5:57 p.m., heading toward the Ferris wheel. A mother of two reported seeing a girl matching Freya's description near the restrooms at 6:05 p.m., after David had already arrived at the Ferris wheel. A teenage couple insisted they'd noticed a blonde girl in a blue jacket being led toward the parking area by an adult male at approximately 6:09 p.m., but couldn't agree on whether the man was wearing a red or black cap. The fair was crowded, people's attention was divided, and frankly, no one was looking for anything suspicious until it was too late. FBI agent Mercer explained to the Harris family during their daily briefing, "We're working to reconcile these accounts, but witness memory is imperfect." The most promising lead came from Elaine Winters, a 67-year-old grandmother who had been resting on a bench near the service road. She reported seeing a maintenance worker speaking to a young girl near the back of the Ferris wheel. "He was showing her something in his toolbox," Winters stated. "I didn't think anything of it because he was wearing a fair staff shirt, one of those blue ones with the logo." This testimony sparked an intensive investigation into all fair employees and vendors. Over 120 staff members were interviewed, their movements during the critical time window scrutinized. Background checks revealed that 17 employees had prior criminal records, mostly minor offenses like DUIs or possession charges. 3 had more serious histories that warranted deeper investigation. Martin Kelly, 42, operated the tilt-a-whirl and had a 15-year-old conviction for assault. Jason Merritt, 38, worked as a traveling electrician with the Carnival Company and had been questioned in a child luring incident in Wisconsin 3 years earlier, though charges were never filed. Robert Dawson, 45, handled maintenance for the fairground facilities and had a sealed juvenile record that investigators had to obtain a court order to access. Each man was brought in for questioning. Kelly provided time-stamped maintenance logs and witness corroboration, placing him at the tilt-a-whirl during Freya's disappearance. Merritt had been repairing electrical issues at the opposite end of the fairgrounds, confirmed by 3 other workers. Dawson's juvenile record revealed a burglary charge from when he was 16, nothing involving children, and security footage showed him working on a plumbing issue in the exhibition hall bathrooms when Freya vanished. "We're clearing suspects as quickly as they emerge," Reeves informed the press during a tense conference on day 5, "but we're not ruling anyone out permanently." The evidence collection process was equally challenging. Forensic teams had combed the area between the cotton candy stand and the Ferris wheel, recovering hundreds of items: discarded tickets, candy wrappers, a child's hair clip, partial fingerprints on railings, and countless footprints in the softer ground near the edge of the midway. The sheer volume of material overwhelmed the local crime lab. "In a controlled crime scene, evidence tells a story," explained forensic technician Lisa Novak. "But at a fairground with thousands of visitors, everything is contaminated. We're looking for a needle in a stack of needles." The most significant physical evidence was Freya's stuffed penguin, found near a trash can by the Ferris wheel. It contained her fingerprints and DNA, confirming she had reached at least that point. Trace evidence on the toy included cotton candy residue and an unidentified fiber that didn't match Freya's clothing or anything in the Harris home. As is standard procedure in missing child cases, investigators turned their attention to the family. David and Sarah Harris submitted to extensive questioning, allowed complete searches of their home and vehicles, and provided DNA samples. Both parents voluntarily took polygraph examinations on day 6. The polygraph is a tool, not a conclusion, Agent Mercer cautioned when explaining the process to the Harrises. We do this to eliminate possibilities and focus our resources. Sarah passed her polygraph without issue. David's results showed slight elevations during questions about the last time he saw Freya, which the examiner attributed to the natural stress and guilt a parent feels after losing sight of their child. "I keep replaying it," David told investigators during a follow-up interview. "If I'd just gone with her to the Ferris wheel instead of waiting for the cotton candy. If I'd kept her by my side. 3 minutes. That's all it took." The investigation expanded to include registered sex offenders living within a 50-mile radius. 27 individuals were identified, each interviewed, and their whereabouts during the fair verified. 25 provided solid alibis through work records, surveillance footage, or witness confirmation. The remaining 2 became persons of interest. Gerald Hoffman, 51, claimed to have been home alone during the fair, but had no way to verify his statement. A subsequent search of his residence revealed no evidence connecting him to Freya. Thomas Larson, 39, initially told police he was out of town visiting family in Duluth, but his sister contradicted this claim, saying he had canceled the trip. When confronted, Larson admitted to lying because he had been drinking despite being on probation for a DUI. Bar receipts and witnesses confirmed he had been at the Rusty Nail Tavern during the time of Freya's disappearance. As days turned into weeks, the investigation weathered a storm of false leads and dashed hopes. A waitress at a truck stop 30 miles north of St. Louis reported serving a man with a young girl matching Freya's description. Surveillance footage revealed it was a father and daughter who were passing through from Canada. A hunter claimed to have found a blue jacket in the woods similar to Freya's, triggering an intensive search that yielded nothing related to the case. The most heartbreaking false lead came on day 17 when a school bus driver in neighboring Carleton County reported seeing a blonde girl resembling Freya walking alone along a rural road. The massive search operation that followed discovered a different blonde girl who had skipped school to visit a friend, crushing the momentary surge of hope that had energized the investigation team and community. As media attention intensified, so did public speculation. The absence of a body or ransom demand left a vacuum filled by rumors and theories that spread through the tight-knit community. Some residents pointed fingers at a recently released offender who had moved back to his mother's home just outside town, though police had confirmed he was hospitalized during the fair. Others whispered about a custody dispute, despite the fact that David and Sarah had been married for 15 years with no history of separation. The most persistent rumor involved a van with out-of-state plates supposedly seen near the service entrance around the time of the disappearance, a lead investigators pursued, but could never substantiate. "We understand the community wants answers," Sheriff Michael Donovan told concerned citizens at a town hall meeting 4 weeks after Freya vanished. "But speculation doesn't help us find Freya. We need facts, not rumors." Behind closed doors, the investigation was hitting walls. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit provided a profile suggesting the abductor was likely male, familiar with the fairgrounds, possibly employed there or a regular attendee, and had either planned the abduction or recognized and seized an opportunity. They believed the person had a means to quickly remove Freya from the area and a secure location to take her. "This doesn't appear to be a random crime of opportunity," Agent Mercer noted in her report. "The location, timing, and lack of witnesses despite the crowd suggests someone who knew the fair's blind spots and had a plan to exploit them." By the 6-week mark, the dedicated task force had been reduced as officers returned to regular duties. The 24-hour command center scaled back to regular business hours. The daily press briefings became weekly updates with less and less new information to share. For the Harris family, the diminishing police presence felt like abandonment. Sarah took a leave of absence from her job to maintain a volunteer search center in a donated storefront downtown. David returned to teaching after 3 weeks at the insistence of his principal, who thought routine might help him cope. Going back to that classroom was the hardest thing I've ever done, David later recalled. 30 kids staring at me, all of them knowing my daughter was missing, all of them wondering if I was falling apart inside. And I was. As the 2-month mark approached with no significant breaks in the case, Detective Reeves made a difficult decision. While the investigation would remain active, he reclassified it as a cold case, allowing for periodic review rather than daily pursuit. The announcement, made during a somber press conference, felt like a death knell to the community's hopes for Freya's safe return. "We haven't given up," Reeves assured the public and the Harris family. "We're simply acknowledging that we need new evidence to move forward. This case will never be closed until we find Freya." What no one could have predicted that autumn day was just how long that wait would be, or that the truth had been captured in witness statements all along, hidden in plain sight like a single puzzle piece turned upside down. This investigation took unexpected turns. Give this video a like if you're following along. What time is it where you're watching from? The transition from active investigation to cold case status wasn't a single moment, but a gradual fading, like a photograph left in sunlight, losing definition day by day. By January 1998, 4 months after Freya's disappearance, the dedicated phone line that once rang constantly now sat silent for days at a time. The wall of leads had been reduced to a single bulletin board in the corner of the detective division. Detective Reeves maintained his ritual of reviewing the case file every Monday morning, coffee in hand, searching for something, anything they might have missed. But even his dedication couldn't stop the inevitable shift of departmental resources. "We've got 3 new homicides, a series of armed robberies, and a sexual assault case," Chief Wilson reminded Reeves during a February staff meeting. "I can't justify keeping officers on a case with no new leads." The task force that once included 12 full-time investigators had dwindled to just Reeves and Officer Jennings, who had been first on the scene the night Freya vanished. By spring, even Jennings had been reassigned to patrol, leaving Reeves as the sole guardian of Freya's case. "It's not abandoned," Reeves insisted during his monthly meeting with the Harris family in March 1998. "It's just waiting. Waiting for that one tip, that one piece of evidence that breaks everything open." Sarah Harris, who had lost 15 pounds and developed insomnia since her daughter's disappearance, leaned forward across Reeves's desk. "And what if that tip never comes? What if that evidence is already in those boxes?" She pointed to the stack of file boxes labeled Harris F that lined the wall of Reeves's office. "What if you've already interviewed the person who took her?" Her questions haunted Reeves, especially because they echoed his own private concerns. Statistically, in child abduction cases, the perpetrator was often someone already questioned in the initial investigation. Someone who had slipped through. As 1998 progressed, new cases demanded attention. A double homicide in April. A series of arsons throughout the summer. A missing college student in October who was found within days. A bittersweet resolution that reopened wounds for the Harris family. Despite the official downgrading of the case, Sarah and David refused to let Freya be forgotten. They established the Freya Harris Foundation, initially to fund continued search efforts and later expanding to advocate for improved missing children protocols. Sarah became a certified search and rescue volunteer, joining teams looking for other missing persons while always hoping these skills might someday help find her own daughter. David channeled his grief into education, developing a child safety program that he presented at schools throughout Minnesota. Freya's Rules for Safety taught elementary students about stranger danger, buddy systems, and how to respond if approached by an unknown adult. The program eventually spread to schools across 3 states. "We can't bring Freya home today," David would tell parents at these presentations, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. "But maybe we can prevent another family from experiencing what we're going through." The first anniversary of Freya's disappearance in September 1998 brought renewed media attention. Local stations ran retrospectives on the case. The St. Louis Herald published a front-page feature titled 365 Days of Questions, detailing the investigation and its impact on the community. National programs like Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted featured segments on Freya, generating hundreds of tips, all of which led nowhere. The community marked the anniversary with a candlelight vigil at the fairgrounds. Over 2,000 people attended, standing silently where Freya had last been seen, holding candles that illuminated the night like earthbound stars. This vigil would become an annual tradition, though attendance gradually diminished over the years. A visual representation of how even the most shocking tragedies eventually fade from public consciousness. By the second anniversary, the media coverage had noticeably decreased. By the fifth, only local outlets covered the story. By the 10th, it had become a brief mention in the On This Day in History section of the newspaper. Yet the Harris family never missed a vigil, never stopped distributing flyers with age progression photos of what Freya might look like as she grew up without them. The impact on St. Louis extended far beyond the investigation. The community that once prided itself on being a place where everyone knows everyone and nobody locks their doors transformed almost overnight. Parents who had allowed children to roam freely now implemented strict check-in procedures. The parks that once bustled with unsupervised play became eerily quiet unless adults were present. Linda Novak, principal of Lakeside Elementary where Freya had been a student, observed the shift firsthand. Before Freya, parents would drop kids at the entrance. After, they started walking them to classrooms, watching until they were safely inside. We installed security cameras, implemented ID checks for visitors. The innocence was gone. The annual county fair, once the community's most anticipated event, saw attendance drop by 40% the year after Freya's disappearance. Despite enhanced security measures, including additional cameras, mandatory ID badges for all staff, and a new parent-child wristband system, many families couldn't bear to return to the site of such trauma. It took nearly 5 years for attendance to recover, and even then, parents rarely let children out of sight. We call them Freya's generation, explained Dr. Eleanor Simmons, a child psychologist who worked with many St. Louis families. These kids grew up with restrictions their older siblings never had. No walking to school alone, no playing outside unsupervised, always in contact, always accounted for. They internalized a fear that previous generations didn't carry. Local businesses adapted to the new reality. The ice cream shop installed a window counter so parents could watch children without leaving the sidewalk. The public library redesigned its children's section to eliminate blind spots and added a check-in system. The community pool implemented a buddy system and hourly roll calls. For law enforcement, Freya's case became both a cautionary tale and a catalyst for change. The department revised its missing persons protocols, eliminating the traditional waiting period for children and implementing immediate response procedures. They established partnerships with neighboring jurisdictions to quickly mobilize regional resources. Annual training sessions used Freya's case as a teaching tool: what went right, what went wrong, and how to improve. Sheriff Donovan, who retired in 2005, later admitted the case had changed him fundamentally. Before Freya, I believed our job was to maintain order. After, I understood our job was to protect the vulnerable. It's a different mindset, a different approach to policing. As years passed, the Harris family weathered the psychological toll of prolonged uncertainty. Unlike families who experienced the devastating closure of finding remains, they lived in a painful limbo, unable to fully grieve, yet struggling to maintain hope as time stretched on. The not knowing is its own special hell, Sarah explained in a rare interview on the 15th anniversary. Every unidentified child found anywhere in the country stops your heart. Every blonde girl you glimpse on the street makes you do a double take. You're constantly braced for news, constantly ready to collapse. The strain eventually affected their marriage. David and Sarah separated briefly in 2006, reconciling after 3 months with the help of counseling. We realized we were the only two people who truly understood each other's pain, David said. Pushing each other away meant facing it alone. Throughout the years, Detective Reeves kept his promise to never truly close the case. Even after his retirement in 2010, he maintained a home office dedicated to Freya's investigation, regularly meeting with his successor, Detective Andrea Martinez, to review developments in similar cases and advances in forensic technology. "Cold doesn't mean forgotten," became Reeves's mantra, repeated at every anniversary press conference. "Cold just means waiting for the right moment, the right technology, the right tip to warm it back up." His persistence wasn't unfounded. According to the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, approximately 100 to 150 cold cases involving missing children are resolved each year in the United States. While many end in heartbreak with the discovery of remains, roughly 30% result in recoveries of living victims or definitive identification of perpetrators who can be brought to justice. The advancement of DNA technology has been particularly significant in solving cold cases. Between 2004 and 2016, familial DNA matching helped resolve over 40 long-dormant abduction and murder cases nationwide. The emergence of genetic genealogy, using commercial DNA databases to identify suspects through family connections, has revolutionized cold case investigation since 2018, resolving cases that had been cold for 30-50 years. Digital forensics has similarly transformed cold case work. Improvements in facial recognition, digital image enhancement, and artificial intelligence-assisted evidence review have breathed new life into investigations once considered hopeless. The ability to analyze massive datasets has allowed investigators to identify patterns and connections previously impossible to detect. For the Harris family and Detective Reeves, these statistics and technological advances provided thin threads of hope during the darkest years. Each new breakthrough in forensic science, each cold case solved elsewhere, reinforced their determination to keep Freya's case alive in public consciousness. "People ask why we don't move on," Sarah said during a community fundraiser for the foundation in 2012. "But that's not how parenting works. You don't stop being a mother because you don't know where your child is. You don't stop searching because it's been years instead of days. Time doesn't change the fact that she's our daughter." As the 15th anniversary approached in 2012, few in St. Louis expected any resolution to the mystery that had defined their community for so long. The case had gone cold, but the memory of Freya, the bright-eyed girl who vanished between a cotton candy stand and a Ferris wheel, remained vivid in collective memory, a cautionary tale passed from parent to child. No one could have anticipated that the first crack in the case was about to appear, or that it would come from a source so unexpected that investigators would initially dismiss it as yet another dead end. Detective Andrea Martinez wasn't supposed to be the one who broke the Freya Harris case. When she was assigned to the cold case unit in 2012, it was meant to be a temporary rotation, 6 months of administrative review before returning to homicide. At 34, she was considered too junior for permanent cold case work, which typically went to detectives nearing retirement. "Cold cases require patience," her lieutenant had explained. "We're putting you there to digitize files and learn the methodology, not to solve anything." Martinez had other ideas. The daughter of a forensic technician, she had grown up hearing about cases that broke open decades later because someone noticed what others had missed. On her first day, she requested the department's 5 oldest unsolved cases, Freya's file among them. "I remember when she disappeared," Martinez told retired Detective Reeves during their first meeting. "I was 12. My mom wouldn't let me go to the fair that year because of what happened. This case is why I became a cop." Reeves, now 68 and battling early-stage Parkinson's, had maintained his connection to the investigation even in retirement. He still met monthly with the Harris family, still followed up on the occasional tip that came through the hotline. He regarded Martinez with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Everyone wants to be the one who solves Freya Harris," he cautioned. 15 years of detectives have tried. What makes you different?" "I'm not looking at what was there," Martinez replied. "I'm looking at what wasn't." Her approach was methodical. Rather than rereading the case summaries, which reflected the biases and conclusions of previous investigators, she went back to the raw evidence and witness statements. She created a digital database of every person mentioned in the file: witnesses, suspects, family members, fair employees, and even the investigators themselves. Each name was cross-referenced with criminal records, addresses, employment history, and connections to other individuals in the case. People don't exist in isolation, she explained during a department review 6 months into her assignment. They have relationships, histories, patterns. Sometimes the connection that matters isn't obvious until you map everything. Her temporary assignment had been extended twice by this point, largely due to her work digitizing the department's cold case files, a project that had revealed numerous investigative connections between seemingly unrelated cases. But it was her request in March 2013 that raised eyebrows throughout the department. I want to retest every piece of physical evidence in the Harris case using current technology, she told Chief Wilson. All of it. The cost would be substantial. In 1997, DNA testing had been expensive and limited, primarily used to confirm or exclude specific suspects when other evidence warranted the expense. The department had tested only a handful of items from the Freya Harris scene: the stuffed penguin, a hair found near the Ferris wheel, and samples from the primary suspects. Martinez was proposing something far more comprehensive: advanced DNA testing on dozens of items, including those previously considered too contaminated or insignificant to warrant analysis. The technology we have now didn't exist when Freya disappeared, Martinez argued. Touch DNA can detect cells we couldn't see before. Familial DNA matching can identify relatives of unknown subjects. Genetic genealogy can build family trees from DNA profiles. We might have had the answer all along without knowing it. Chief Wilson, mindful of both budget constraints and the high-profile nature of the case, approved a limited re-examination. Start with the 5 most promising items, he instructed. If you find something, we'll discuss expanding the testing. Martinez selected her targets carefully: the unidentified fiber from the stuffed penguin, a partial fingerprint from the trash can where the toy was found, a cigarette butt recovered near the service road, a soda cup from near the Ferris wheel, and the original swabs from the penguin's surface that had yielded inconclusive results in 1997. The testing process was painstaking. Modern touch DNA analysis could detect cellular material left by brief contact with an object, but the age of the samples complicated matters. The lab warned that degradation over 15 years might render some samples unusable. While waiting for results, Martinez pursued another avenue: digital forensic enhancement of the limited security footage from the fair. In 1997, the grainy VHS recordings had been reviewed frame by frame, yielding little useful information. Using modern enhancement algorithms, Martinez hoped to extract details previously invisible to investigators. The original team was looking for Freya or an obvious abduction, she explained to Reeves during one of their regular meetings. I'm looking for patterns of movement, for someone who appears in multiple locations without apparent purpose, for anyone paying attention to Freya earlier in the day. The enhanced footage revealed subtle details: a maintenance worker who appeared in 3 different camera angles within the critical time frame, a man with a baseball cap whose path seemed to intersect with the Harris family multiple times throughout the day, a security guard who deviated from his assigned route shortly after Freya was last seen. Martinez tracked down and interviewed all 3 men. The maintenance worker had left the state years ago, but provided employment records confirming his assigned tasks that day. The man in the baseball cap turned out to be a father of 3, who had been there with his own family, now living in Florida. The security guard, Ronald Meeks, had died in 2006 from a heart attack. It feels like we're chasing ghosts, Martinez confided to Sarah Harris during a difficult update meeting in June 2013. But sometimes ghosts leave fingerprints. Her comment proved more prescient than she could have imagined. 2 weeks later, the lab results from the re-examined evidence arrived. 4 of the 5 items yielded no usable new information, but the partial fingerprint from the trash can, previously considered insufficient for identification, had responded to new development techniques. We have a viable print, the technician reported. Not complete, but enough ridge detail for the AFIS system to run a comparison. The automated fingerprint identification system had expanded dramatically since 1997, now containing millions more prints from criminal bookings, employment background checks, and military records. The partial print was entered into the system, and the algorithm began its search. No match was found in the criminal database. It was the outcome we expected but hoped against, Martinez later wrote in her case notes. If the print belonged to our subject and they had a criminal record, we would have identified them years ago. Undeterred, she expanded the search to include employment and military records. 3 weeks later, as she was pursuing other angles, the system flagged a potential match. Not perfect, but close enough to warrant human verification. The print belonged to a man named Edward Kane, who had no criminal record but whose fingerprints were in the system due to his employment as a school bus driver in 2001. The fingerprint specialist confirmed it was a match. Martinez ran Kane's name through her database of case-connected individuals. He didn't appear in any witness statements, suspect interviews, or employee records from the fair. He seemed to have no connection to the case whatsoever. Who is Edward Kane, and why was his fingerprint on that trash can? She asked, during an emergency meeting with Chief Wilson and the county prosecutor. The background check revealed that in 1997, Kane had been 27 years old and working as a part-time security contractor. His employer, Northland Security Services, the company that provided supplemental security for the county fair. He was there, Martinez realized. He was working security the day Freya disappeared. Further investigation revealed something even more significant. Northland's employee records showed that Kane had been assigned to the Midway area, specifically the section that included the Ferris wheel. Yet his name appeared nowhere in the original investigation files. How did we miss him? Reeves asked when Martinez called with the news. We interviewed every security guard on duty. The answer emerged from Northland's archived scheduling documents. Edward Kane had been a last-minute replacement, called in when another guard called sick just hours before the shift. In the chaos following Freya's disappearance, the updated employee roster had never been provided to investigators. But the most disturbing discovery came when Martinez ran Kane's name through a different database, one that hadn't existed in 1997. The National Sex Offender Registry showed no record for Edward Kane, but when she expanded the search to include aliases and maiden names, a connection appeared. Edward Kane had legally changed his name in 1995. He had previously been Edward Mercer. Mercer, Martinez whispered, the name triggering a memory from the case file. She pulled up the witness statement from Elaine Winters, the grandmother who had reported seeing a maintenance worker in a blue shirt showing a young girl his toolbox near the back of the Ferris wheel. The original investigators had focused on maintenance workers wearing the fair's blue uniform shirts. But Northland Security also issued blue shirts to their personnel. Different in design, but similar enough to create confusion for a witness viewing them briefly. When Martinez ran Edward Mercer's original name through criminal databases, she found what the 1997 investigation had missed: a sealed juvenile record from another state for an offense committed when he was 16. A record that would have been flagged had his current name been included in the security staff roster. The final piece fell into place when the lab results from the touch DNA analysis of the penguin swabs came back. Using techniques that didn't exist in 1997, they had isolated a partial male DNA profile from cells left on the toy's surface. While insufficient for a definitive identification, it was enough for a familial DNA search. That search revealed a potential relative in the system. A man convicted of drug charges in 2010, Edward Kane's cousin. The familial connection, combined with the fingerprint match and his undisclosed presence at the scene, provided enough probable cause for a warrant. 15 years after Freya Harris disappeared, detectives finally had a viable suspect. Cold cases like this prove persistence pays off. Comment below with today's weather where you are while we reveal what happened next. Edward Kane had built a life that was deliberately unremarkable. At 42, he lived in a modest ranch-style home in Greenfield, a small community 30 miles from St. Louis. His neighbors described him as quiet but friendly, the type who would wave from his driveway but rarely engage in lengthy conversations. He kept his lawn meticulously maintained, paid his bills on time, and volunteered occasionally at community cleanup events. He was just normal. His next-door neighbor of 8 years would later tell investigators. Nothing about him stood out. I guess that was the point. For the past decade, Kane had worked as a delivery driver for a regional medical supply company, a job that kept him on the road 4 days a week, traveling throughout Minnesota and into neighboring states. His supervisor described him as reliable and efficient, noting that he rarely took sick days and never complained about the long routes he was assigned. He preferred the rural deliveries, the supervisor recalled. Said he liked the quiet of country driving. We were happy to accommodate since most drivers want the city routes. His personal life appeared equally ordinary. Divorced once in his early 30s, no children, a girlfriend who lived in Wisconsin whom he visited every few weekends, a small circle of casual acquaintances rather than close friends. He bowled in a Thursday night league during winter months and fished occasionally in summer. His social media presence was minimal. A Facebook page updated a few times a year with photos of fishing trips or bowling trophies. What no one in his current life knew was that Edward Kane had methodically constructed this unremarkable existence. The name change from Edward Mercer had been just the beginning of a carefully crafted reinvention. Detective Martinez assembled a surveillance team within 48 hours of identifying Kane as a suspect. The operation required extreme discretion. If Kane realized he was under investigation, he might destroy evidence or flee. 4 detectives working in rotating pairs maintained 24-hour surveillance, documenting his movements, interactions, and routines. We're not just watching him, Martinez instructed the team. We're building a profile of how he operates now. Patterns matter. Those patterns quickly revealed a man of precise habits. Kane left for work at exactly 5:45 a.m. on delivery days. He stopped at the same gas station for coffee. His routes, while varying by destination, followed predictable patterns. He avoided certain types of roads and always took breaks at established rest areas rather than random stops. He's hyper-aware of his surroundings, noted Detective Wilson, one of the surveillance team members. He regularly checks his rearview mirror even on empty highways. He varies his return routes from his outbound ones. These aren't typical behaviors for a delivery driver. While the surveillance continued, Martinez delved deeper into Kane's past. The juvenile record that had been sealed revealed a disturbing incident. At 16, Edward Mercer had been caught breaking into a family's home while they were on vacation. The concerning detail wasn't the burglary itself, but what he had done inside the house. He had spent hours there, going through the family's belongings, focusing particularly on the bedroom of their 9-year-old daughter. He had taken photos of himself with her toys and clothing. The judge, noting his young age and lack of prior offenses, had sentenced him to juvenile detention and mandatory counseling. Upon turning 18, the record was sealed as part of a rehabilitation program. 2 years later, he enlisted in the Army, serving 4 years in an administrative role before receiving an honorable discharge. At 24, he returned to civilian life and began working security jobs. At 25, he petitioned for a legal name change, citing personal reasons in the application. He understood systems, Martinez observed. He knew how to use legal processes to his advantage, how to create distance from his past. The investigation expanded to include Kane's military service. His record showed no disciplinary actions, but former colleagues described him as a loner who rarely participated in unit social activities. One remembered him collecting newspaper clippings about missing persons cases, claiming it was research for a crime novel he planned to write. As the surveillance operation entered its second week, Martinez secured warrants for Kane's phone and internet records. His search history revealed periodic queries about the Freya Harris case, not obsessive, but consistent over years. He had visited the Freya Harris Foundation website multiple times and had made 2 anonymous donations of $100 each on the anniversaries of her disappearance. He's keeping tabs on the investigation, Martinez told Chief Wilson, monitoring what we know and don't know. The cell phone data provided another crucial piece of information. Kane's regular routes as a delivery driver included multiple stops near schools, playgrounds, and youth sports facilities, often with unexplained delays in these areas. While not conclusive of current criminal activity, the pattern raised serious concerns. 3 weeks into the investigation, Martinez felt they had enough circumstantial evidence to approach the county prosecutor about additional warrants. The prosecutor agreed, but cautioned that they needed more direct evidence connecting Kane to Freya's abduction before making an arrest. "The fingerprint and DNA connection to the penguin are strong," she acknowledged. "But a defense attorney could argue he simply touched the toy while working security. We need something that places him with Freya after she disappeared from public view." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing Kane's credit card statements, financial analyst Teresa Huang noticed a recurring charge every 3 months to a storage facility in Duluth, nearly 200 miles from his residence. The facility didn't appear in any of his known addresses or connections. Why would someone maintain a storage unit that far from home? Huang questioned. Especially someone as financially careful as Kane. He has no other unnecessary expenses. The discovery shifted the investigation's focus. Surveillance teams confirmed that Kane made the 3-hour drive to Duluth every 3 months, always on a Sunday, always alone. He would spend approximately 30 minutes at the storage facility before driving directly back home. With this information, Martinez secured a warrant for the storage unit. To avoid tipping off Kane, the team planned the search for a Tuesday when he would be on an overnight delivery route to North Dakota. What they discovered inside the climate-controlled 10XX10 unit would later be described by veteran officers as a museum of obsession. The space was meticulously organized with labeled plastic containers, filing cabinets, and a small desk with a logbook. One wall held a corkboard covered with newspaper clippings about Freya's case and other missing children from across the Midwest. The containers held items organized by year, memorabilia from county fairs, security uniforms, and handwritten journals detailing Kane's thoughts and activities. In a locked filing cabinet, investigators found a folder labeled FH, containing items that made their blood run cold. A blue jacket matching the description of what Freya had been wearing, a hair ribbon consistent with how she wore her hair in photos, and several photographs of a young girl who appeared to be Freya, unconscious or asleep in what looked like the back of a van. "We've got him," Martinez radioed back to headquarters. "And I think we need to accelerate our timeline. This isn't just about what happened 15 years ago. The organization, the record-keeping, this is a pattern of behavior." The most disturbing discovery came from the journals. Kane had documented not only the abduction of Freya Harris, but also detailed surveillance of at least 7 other young girls over the years. While the journals didn't explicitly confirm additional abductions, they described close calls and perfect opportunities that suggested he had either attempted or seriously contemplated other crimes. With this evidence, the prosecutor approved an immediate arrest warrant. Rather than waiting for Kane to return home, Martinez coordinated with North Dakota authorities to apprehend him at his motel during his delivery route. At 6:15 a.m. on Wednesday, a tactical team took him into custody without incident. His only response upon arrest was to ask, "Which one is this about?" As the investigation expanded following his arrest, the full picture of how Kane had evaded detection for so long began to emerge. His connection to the county fair went beyond his last-minute security assignment in 1997. Records revealed he had worked security at the fair for 3 consecutive years prior under his original name, Edward Mercer. After Freya's disappearance, he had never returned to that fair but had worked security at similar events in other counties. He knew the layout intimately, Martinez explained during a briefing with the FBI, who had joined the expanded investigation. He understood the camera blind spots, the staff routines, the security protocols. He didn't just happen to be there that day. He had been studying the environment for years. His method of abduction, detailed in his journals, showed calculated precision. Assigned to the Midway section, he had observed the Harris family throughout the day, noting when Freya separated even briefly from her parents. When he saw her walking alone toward the Ferris wheel, he approached her in his security uniform, telling her there had been a report of a lost child and asking if she would help identify them. He led her behind the ride to a service area, claiming the child was waiting with another security officer. From there, he had taken her through a service gate to an employee parking area where his van was waiting. The entire abduction had taken less than 4 minutes, executed in a way that would have appeared completely normal to any onlookers. A security guard helping a child would raise no alarms. What had allowed him to evade suspicion for so long was a combination of factors: the name change that prevented his juvenile record from being flagged, the last-minute staff assignment that kept him off the initial employee roster, and his calculated decision to leave the security job immediately after the incident, creating distance between himself and the investigation. He understood how investigations work, Martinez noted. Each time we expanded the search radius or followed up on a lead, he was already 3 steps removed. Perhaps most chilling was how he had monitored the case over the years. Beyond checking news reports and the Foundation website, Kane had attended 3 of the annual vigils for Freya, standing at the back of the crowd, watching the Harris family and the investigators. He had even approached Detective Reeves once, introducing himself as a concerned citizen and asking about progress in the case. "I remember him," Reeves said when shown a photo. "He seemed genuinely interested in how we were handling cold cases, asked intelligent questions about evidence preservation and new technologies. I thought he might be a criminal justice student." As the evidence mounted, investigators faced a troubling question. Had Kane been responsible for other missing children cases? The journals suggested possible connections to 2 unsolved disappearances in Wisconsin and 1 in Michigan, though they contained no explicit confessions. Task forces in those states began re-examining their evidence in light of Kane's arrest. For the St. Louis Police Department and the Harris family, the identification of a suspect after 15 years brought a complex mixture of emotions: vindication, grief, and the haunting question of whether Freya might have been found sooner had different decisions been made in 1997. He was hiding in plain sight, Martinez reflected. Working security at the very event where he committed the crime. It's the perfect cover. Who suspects the person wearing the uniform designed to make you feel safe? The arrest of Edward Kane required precise coordination across state lines. With the suspect currently in Garrison, North Dakota, a small town where any unusual police activity would be immediately noticed, Detective Martinez worked with local authorities to develop a tactical approach that would minimize risk and prevent any opportunity for escape or self-harm. "We need to take him by surprise," Martinez instructed during the planning video conference. "No sirens, no marked vehicles, nothing that gives him warning or time to react." The North Dakota tactical team positioned plainclothes officers in the motel lobby and parking lot at 5:30 a.m., 45 minutes before Kane typically emerged for breakfast. 2 officers disguised as maintenance workers stationed themselves in the hallway near his room. State police vehicles waited out of sight at the highway entrance, ready to create a perimeter if needed. At 6:12 a.m., the room phone rang. A call from the front desk informing Kane there was an issue with his credit card that needed immediate attention. When he opened his door 3 minutes later, dressed in his delivery uniform and ready for the day, he found himself facing officers with weapons drawn. "Edward Kane, you're under arrest," the lead officer announced, quickly moving to secure him before he could retreat into the room. Witnesses described Kane's reaction as unnervingly calm. He offered no resistance as officers handcuffed him and read his Miranda rights. His only words, "Which one is this about?" sent a chill through the arresting officers, suggesting there might be multiple crimes for which he could be detained. Within an hour, he was secured in a county holding facility, awaiting transport back to Minnesota. Martinez had requested no public announcement of the arrest until she could personally inform the Harris family and prepare local authorities for the inevitable media storm. Sarah and David Harris had grown accustomed to updates that led nowhere. When Martinez called requesting an in-person meeting, they expected another dead end, another apology for lack of progress. They sat together on their living room couch, hands clasped, as they had for countless similar meetings over 15 years. "We've made an arrest," Martinez told them, her voice steady but gentle. "We have substantial evidence linking a suspect directly to Freya's abduction." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. David seemed to age in reverse, the perpetual weariness lifting from his face for the first time in years. "Who?" he asked, the single word carrying 15 years of anguish. Martinez explained Kane's identity, his connection to the fair, and the evidence recovered from the storage unit. She deliberately omitted the most disturbing details from the journals and photographs, promising a more complete briefing when they were ready. The blue jacket, Sarah whispered when Martinez mentioned the items recovered. Is it really hers? Martinez nodded. The lab is confirming with DNA testing, but it matches the description and size exactly. David's question cut to the heart of what every parent of a missing child needs to know. Is she... He couldn't finish the sentence. We don't have those answers yet, Martinez replied honestly. The investigation is ongoing. What we have is enough to charge him with kidnapping, but we're still building the complete case. The news conference was scheduled for 3 p.m. that same day. By noon, rumors had begun circulating through law enforcement channels, and local reporters were already calling the department for confirmation. Chief Wilson decided to move forward with the announcement rather than risk misinformation spreading. The department's press room, typically half empty for routine briefings, was packed beyond capacity. National news networks had dispatched crews as soon as they caught wind of a break in the infamous cold case. Reporters who had covered the original disappearance, now 15 years older, stood alongside younger journalists who knew Freya only as a case study in criminology classes. Today, the St. Louis Police Department, in coordination with multiple agencies, has arrested Edward Kane, age 42, in connection with the 1997 disappearance of Freya Harris, Chief Wilson announced, his voice solemn. This arrest comes after new evidence emerged through the diligent work of our cold case unit, particularly Detective Andrea Martinez. The revelation of Kane's identity sent immediate shockwaves through the community. As a delivery driver for a medical supply company, he had regular contact with hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes throughout the region. His bowling league teammates knew him as Ed, a decent bowler with a dry sense of humor who always bought a round after winning. The volunteer fire department in Greenfield had presented him with a Citizens Award 3 years earlier for helping evacuate an elderly couple during a wildfire. I just can't believe it, said Thomas Larson, captain of Kane's bowling team, when reporters gathered outside the bowling alley that evening. We've known him for years. He was at my daughter's graduation party last summer. Neighbors in Greenfield expressed similar disbelief, many initially defending him against what they considered impossible accusations. There must be some mistake, insisted Eleanor Winters, who lived across the street. Ed shovels my driveway every winter without being asked. He's not capable of something like this. As details emerged about the evidence found in the Duluth storage unit, that disbelief transformed into horror and self-recrimination. Parents who had waved to Kane as he drove through their neighborhoods now questioned every interaction, wondering if their own children had been observed, evaluated, considered as potential victims. The media coverage was relentless. News vans lined the street outside the St. Louis Police Department. Reporters tracked down former colleagues from Kane's security jobs and military service. His ex-wife, now remarried and living in Oregon, issued a brief statement through her attorney expressing shock and requesting privacy. National morning shows ran segments on the man behind the mask, exploring how predators integrate into communities while hiding their true nature. True crime podcasts released emergency episodes analyzing the case. Social media exploded with amateur sleuths sharing theories about other unsolved cases that might be connected to Kane. For the Harris family, the media attention brought both validation and fresh trauma. After years of struggling to keep Freya's case in the public consciousness, they now faced a barrage of interview requests and uninvited opinions. Well-meaning neighbors left flowers on their porch. Strangers sent messages of support and occasionally intrusive questions. We're grateful for the arrest, David stated in a brief press release, but we ask for privacy as we process this development and cooperate with ongoing investigations. The community's reaction evolved in waves. The initial shock gave way to anger, not just at Kane, but at a system that had allowed him to slip through the cracks. Questions arose about the thoroughness of the original investigation, about how someone working security at the fair could have been overlooked. We interviewed every employee on the official roster, former Sheriff Donovan defended when pressed by reporters. If his name wasn't provided to us, we couldn't have known he was there. Churches throughout St. Louis held prayer services for the Harris family, for closure, for healing of a community wound that had never fully closed. The annual vigil site at the fairgrounds became an impromptu memorial, covered with fresh flowers, candles, and notes expressing both relief that a suspect had been identified and sorrow for the years of uncertainty. Schools brought in counselors to help students process the news, particularly in Greenfield, where many children had interacted with Kane during community events. Parents struggled to explain to younger children why someone they had been taught to trust, a man in uniform, a community volunteer, might have committed such a crime. "The hardest part is the betrayal," explained Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the child psychologist who had worked with many local families over the years. "Not just that he may have committed this terrible act, but that he lived among us, was part of our community. It forces everyone to question their judgment, their sense of safety." For Detective Reeves, now watching the case unfold from retirement, the arrest brought complicated emotions. "I spoke to him," he reminded Martinez during a phone call after the news broke. "He asked me about the investigation and I answered. I never suspected a thing." "None of us did," Martinez assured him. "He built his entire life around not being suspected." As Kane was transported back to Minnesota for arraignment, the community he had deceived for years began the difficult process of reconciling the neighbor they thought they knew with the predator now revealed. For many, the most terrifying realization was not just what he had allegedly done, but how effectively he had hidden in plain sight. A shadow passing unnoticed through their lives for 15 years. The St. Louis County Courthouse had never seen security measures as stringent as those implemented for Edward Kane's arraignment. Metal detectors, bomb-sniffing dogs, and officers positioned throughout the building created an atmosphere more reminiscent of a high-profile terrorism case than a local criminal proceeding. The community's anger had crystallized into something dangerous. Threats against Kane had poured in, necessitating extraordinary precautions. When Kane entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, the gallery fell silent. Parents of Freya's former classmates, reporters, and curious citizens strained to get a glimpse of the man whose ordinary appearance seemed to mock the monstrous acts described in the charging documents. "Edward Kane, you are charged with kidnapping in the first degree, false imprisonment, and obstruction of justice," Judge Eleanor Winters read, her voice steady, despite having known the defendant as a neighbor. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Kane responded, his voice so quiet the court reporter asked him to repeat himself. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Lawson, requested Kane be held without bail, citing flight risk and the discovery of $23,000 in cash and fake identification documents in a hidden compartment in his home. The defense didn't contest the request, aware that no judge would grant bail given the circumstances. The preliminary hearings revealed the prosecution's strategy, methodically connecting Kane to Freya's disappearance through forensic evidence while building a psychological profile through his journals and storage unit contents. The defense, meanwhile, focused on the 15-year gap between the crime and arrest, suggesting evidence contamination and memory degradation would make a fair trial impossible. 6 months of pre-trial motions and evidence hearings culminated in a surprising development. Facing overwhelming physical evidence and the prospect of additional charges from other jurisdictions, Kane agreed to a plea deal, but with conditions. "My client will plead guilty to the kidnapping of Freya Harris and provide a full accounting of his actions," defense attorney Michael Stern announced. In exchange, he requests a guarantee that he will serve his sentence in a facility with protective custody provisions and that the death penalty be removed from consideration. For the Harris family, the prospect of a plea meant answers without the trauma of a lengthy trial, but also the painful reality that Kane would control the narrative of what happened to their daughter. After agonizing discussions with prosecutors, they supported accepting the deal. On a cold morning in February 2014, Edward Kane stood before Judge Winters and admitted to abducting Freya Harris from the county fair in 1997. In a flat, emotionless voice, He described how he had used his security uniform to gain her trust, led her to his van, and driven her to a remote cabin in northern Wisconsin that he had prepared specifically for that purpose. The courtroom remained deathly silent as he detailed the following days. While he admitted to keeping Freya captive for nearly a week, he claimed she had died from an asthma attack, a condition not noted in her medical records. According to Kane, he had panicked and buried her body in the woods near the cabin, a property that had since been developed into a lakeside resort. Forensic teams were immediately dispatched to the location. After 3 days of careful excavation, they recovered remains consistent with a child of Freya's age and build. Dental records confirmed what the Harris family had both feared and suspected for 16 years. Freya had never left Wisconsin alive. The sentencing hearing 2 months later drew national attention. The courthouse plaza filled with community members holding candles and photos of Freya. Inside, Sarah and David Harris prepared to face their daughter's abductor one final time due to her personal connection to the defendant, was replaced by Judge Marcus Thompson, known for his strict sentencing in crimes against children. Before I pronounce sentence, Thompson addressed the courtroom, I will hear impact statements from the victim's family. Sarah Harris approached the podium first, clutching a framed photo of Freya. For 16 years, she had imagined what she might say if ever given the chance to address the person responsible for her daughter's disappearance. Now, facing that moment, she spoke not of hatred, but of what had been stolen. You didn't just take a child, she said, her voice unwavering as she looked directly at Kane. You took first dances and driving lessons. You took graduation and college applications. You took wedding days and grandchildren. You took our future and replaced it with 16 years of questions. David Harris spoke of how Freya's disappearance had changed not just their family, but an entire community. Children who grew up in fear, parents who lost their sense of safety, a town forever marked by what happened on a September evening at the county fair. Whatever sentence you receive, he concluded, know that we served a longer one. The difference is that today, our sentence of uncertainty ends, while yours is just beginning. Judge Thompson sentenced Edward Kane to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, the maximum allowed under the plea agreement. Additionally, he ordered Kane to pay restitution to the Harris family and cover the costs of the extensive search operations conducted over 16 years. No punishment can restore what was taken, Thompson stated, but justice demands that you spend every remaining day of your life contemplating the harm you have caused. As Kane was led from the courtroom, the community began the long process of healing. Freya's remains were returned to her family for a proper burial, a funeral delayed by 16 years, but attended by hundreds who had kept her memory alive. The case left lasting impacts on forensic science and cold case investigation. The techniques used to extract DNA from degraded evidence and enhance decades-old security footage became standard procedures in similar cases nationwide. The digital database approach pioneered by Detective Martinez was adopted by numerous departments, leading to resolutions in other long-dormant investigations. For the Harris family, the conclusion brought a bittersweet form of closure. The questions that had haunted them for 16 years had been answered, though not in the way they had hoped during those early days of searching. We always knew, somewhere deep down, Sarah later confided to Martinez. But knowing is different from accepting. Now we can finally focus on remembering Freya instead of looking for her. This case shows justice can come even decades later. Hit subscribe and share this video with someone interested in true crime. What cold cases would you like to see covered next? 20 years after Freya Harris disappeared between a cotton candy stand and a Ferris wheel, St. Louis, Minnesota stands as a community transformed. The annual vigil that once served as a reminder of an unsolved tragedy has evolved into a celebration of resilience and remembrance. The Freya Harris Memorial Garden, established near the elementary school she attended, blooms with perennials that return year after year, a living symbol of how memory persists, even as time moves forward. The investigation that finally brought answers changed how missing persons cases are handled nationwide. The Freya Protocol, adopted by police departments across the country, emphasizes preservation of evidence for future testing, digital cataloging of all case connections, and periodic review with fresh eyes. Detective Martinez, now heading the expanded cold case unit, trains investigators to look beyond the obvious, to question assumptions, and to recognize that technology not yet invented may someday unlock decades-old mysteries. Perhaps Freya's most profound legacy lives in the foundation that bears her name. What began as a desperate attempt by grieving parents to find their daughter has grown into an organization that has helped locate over 200 missing children and provided support to countless families navigating similar nightmares. The Child Safety Program developed by David Harris is now standard curriculum in elementary schools throughout the Midwest. For investigators facing seemingly impossible cold cases, Freya's story serves as both caution and inspiration, a reminder that justice delayed need not be justice denied. The breakthrough may come from evidence collected decades earlier, waiting for the right technology, the right detective, the right moment to reveal its secrets. In the end, Freya's case teaches us that some questions can be answered even after years of silence, that persistence matters, that the truth, however painful, provides a foundation upon which healing can finally begin.